Brazil and India have been seeking big cuts in aid provided to farmers in industrial countries. The two nations have played the part of spokesman for many of the least developed nations in the 150-member WTO. During the talks, the United States offered to limit farm aid, or subsidies, to $17 billion a year. That is down from $22 billion offered in October of 2005. But Brazil wants the United States to promise a bigger reduction in farm aid to below $15 billion. Currently, American farmers receive a total of about $11 billion a year in subsidies. Indian Trade Minister Kamal Nath blamed the United States' position on farm aid for the failure of the talks. But India wants to protect 20% of its farm product import taxes from all or most cuts. United States Agriculture Secretary Mike Johans said that would leave almost all of India's import taxes in place. An official at the talks said the EU offered to cut import taxes on its most protected farm products by 70%. That is 10 percentage points higher than its proposal from October 2005. Products considered especially important would only receive subsidy cuts of 23%. The Doha round of WTO negotiations started in November of 2001. A main goal was for rich countries to reduce their farm subsidies on important crops like cotton, sugar, and corn. In return, developing countries would reduce or end barriers to trade in goods and services from industrial countries. Now negotiations of the Doha round will have to continue in Geneva, Switzerland. United States Trade Representative Susan Schwab said nations want to reach agreement on the Doha Development Plan, but she admitted that negotiations only among the G4 nations may not be enough.
In the United States, there are growing calls to do more to help young people learn skills in financial literacy. Some efforts begin in high school, but more and more information is available on the Internet, not only for young people, but also for adults. The goal is to teach about budgeting, saving, investing, and using money. The United States Financial Literacy and Education Commission was established in 2003. This government group supervises financial education efforts through 19 federal agencies. Information on financial literacy and education can be found at its website. The address is mymoney.gov. It includes links to agencies that deal with banking, buying a home, investing, and other areas. The National Council on Economic Education has found that 17 states now require high school students to take a class in economics. This number has grown from 13 in 1998. As of 3 years ago, half of all states required students to take a class in personal finance. Yet that number has fallen from 25 to 22. The National Council on Economic Education sells textbooks for grades 4 through 12. It also offers free materials for teachers. The information is available at ncee.net. Teachers say parents also need to play a larger part in educating their children about money. A recent study found that 70% of college students said they received financial advice mainly from their parents.
The organization is the largest of its kind. JA Worldwide says it reaches about 7.5 million students each year in nearly 100 countries. Programs begin in elementary school and continue through middle and high school. The education is based on the ideas of market-based economics and entrepreneurship. Junior achievement began in 1919 in Springfield, Massachusetts. Two business leaders, Horace Moses and Theodore Vail, joined with Senator Murray Crane of Massachusetts to start it. For more than 50 years, junior achievement programs met after school. They began as a group of business clubs. The organization started with a small number of children, ages 10 to 12.
In Panama, medicine made with a poisonous chemical killed or sickened more than 100 people. A Chinese company had identified the additive as glycerin, a safe sweetener and thickener. But it was really diethylene glycol, a low-cost substitute commonly used in automobile antifreeze. Some countries have banned Chinese-made toothpaste containing diethylene glycol. China has now told companies to discontinue this use, even though it says the toothpaste is safe. Another industrial chemical, melamine, was found in wheat flour used to make pet food in North America. Thousands of dogs and cats died or became sick. The United States has restricted some imports of Chinese seafood because they contain banned substances. And questions have been raised about other products, including children's toys covered in lead paint. The European Union is China's biggest trade partner. Magdalena Kuneva, its Commissioner for Consumer Protection, was in Beijing this week. Chinese officials promised her they would provide the European Union with detailed reports on enforcement efforts against unsafe goods. China agreed in January of last year to do this every 3 months. She said China has not done so. Li Changjiang is director of the State Administration of Quality Supervision, Inspection, and Quarantine. She said China will work to guarantee the quality of its products. China recently closed 3 companies linked to the Panama deaths and the pet food scare, and it executed the former head of its Food and Drug Administration. He was found guilty of corruption for approving unsafe drugs.
The two companies announced Wednesday that they have signed a merger agreement. The deal is valued at just over $5.5 billion. For the past century, the controlling shareholder in Dow Jones and Company has been the Bancroft family. The announcement said family members, with about 37% of Dow Jones voting stock, have agreed to support the deal. That would represent a majority of the 64% share owned by the family. The deal ends 4 months of negotiations that deeply divided the Bancrofts. Reports say family members agreed to the deal after a promise of at least $30 million to pay their lawyers and financial advisors. Rupert Murdoch's offer to buy Dow Jones became public in May. His offer of $60 a share was 67% above the market price at the time of the offer. The deal is seen as a major prize for the Australian-born Murdoch, who became an American citizen in 1985. He has built a media business currently valued at $70 billion. His company owns more than 100 newspapers in Australia, Britain, and the United States. It also owns Fox Television, including Fox News Channel, American Idol, and The Simpsons. A new Fox Business Channel is set for launch in October. Other holdings include the 20th Century Fox Movie Company and the social networking site MySpace. Shareholders in News Corporation and Dow Jones are expected to vote on the deal later this year. Government approval is also needed.
Liquidity can also suggest the ease with which money can be raised in debt markets. And this is where concerns are being raised. Offering credit always carries some risk that the loan will not be repaid. Now, experts are saying that investors are as concerned about debt risk as they have been since 2001. One way to measure investors' concern is by their willingness to buy new debt investments. Recently, banks, led by J.P. Morgan, postponed the sale of $12 billion in bonds for the carmaker Chrysler. The bond offering was part of a deal by private equity company Cerberus Capital Management to buy Chrysler from German carmaker Daimler. Reports say the deal is not in danger, but it could mean an increase in borrowing costs. American markets are not the only ones in which banks are having trouble selling bonds. American private equity company Kohlberg Kravis Roberts hoped to raise over $10 billion in bonds. This was part of a deal to buy Alliance Boots, a European company that sells medicines. But a group of banks had to postpone the sale because of a lack of buyers. Conditions for big deals by private equity companies appear to be cooling. Private equity companies depend on liquid debt markets to lend them money, and investors are less willing to put money into debt securities. Part of this is the flight from risk involving investments based on subprime home loans. These loans carry lower than average credit quality, but also pay higher interest rates. Credit rating agencies are now recognizing that investments based on subprime home loans are riskier than investors have thought.
The results come from testing 11,500 students last year in public and private schools. In fact, students did better in economics than in history or science. Only 47% of those tested reached the basic level in history, and 54% performed at or above the basic level in science. This is the first time the federal government has measured economic understanding among high school students. The study was done as part of the National Assessment of Educational Progress called the Nation's Report Card. Only 1/3 of the 50 states require it, but most students these days study some economics in high school. In 1982, 49% of high school graduates had taken an economics class. By 2005, it was 66%. The study rated understanding at 3 levels: basic, proficient, and advanced. 42% of students reached the proficient level. 3% tested at the highest achievement level. Students received a score with a point value between 0 and 300. The report says male students scored an average of 4 points higher than female students, and students from schools in large cities did not do as well as those from other places. Students answered questions in 3 major areas: market economy and national and international economy. 72% could describe the risk and possible rewards of leaving a job for more education. 52% knew what happened to money deposited in banks, but only 11% understood how changes in the unemployment rate affect pay, spending, and production. The next economics testing will take place in 2012.
Last week, the world's largest toy company announced the largest recall in its history. Mattel is recalling more than 18 million toys that contain small, powerful magnets. These can cause serious injury if swallowed. One death has already been reported. The toys were made over the past 5 years, based on Mattel designs that the company says have now been improved. Mattel combined its announcement with a separate recall of more than 400,000 toy cars. Mattel said the manufacturer, Li Der Industrial in China, used lead-based paint without permission. Chinese media said the company owner hanged himself. The vehicles are based on the Sarge character in the movie Cars. Mattel is based in California, but makes about 65% of its products in China. The company promises greater testing. On August 1st, Mattel recalled almost 1 million toys from its Fisher-Price division because of lead paint. That recall cost the company $30 million. Other companies have also recalled children's products. Last week, Toys R Us recalled baby bibs made in China. Independent tests showed that the vinyl bibs contained high levels of lead. The seller of a simple test for lead in products has seen its sales jump. The kit from Homax can be found in stores, including home improvement centers. Homax's Donald Ham says the company is receiving 5 or 6 calls each day from businesses wanting to sell the lead check kit. The company has now set up a website to sell directly to the public at leadtesttoys.com. Subprime mortgages are loans to people who may not have enough money to repay them. These and other risky housing loans are often grouped with other mortgages and sold as debt investments. Investors all over the world have bought bonds and other securities based on subprime mortgages as a way to earn higher returns. Sometimes the investors are banks that want to spread their risk by investing in several different countries. What happened in late July to a German bank, however, is an example of spreading risk with bad results. IKB Deutsche Industrie Bank had put money into American debt securities, including some based on subprime loans. Some of those loans started to fail. The bank was in danger of not being able to pay its short-term debts. Other German banks, led by the government-owned KfW Group, agreed to provide almost $5 billion to aid IKB. In early August, the French bank BNP Paribas had to temporarily bar investors from withdrawing money from 3 investment funds. Their value dropped by 20% in less than 2 weeks. The bank blamed difficulties in valuing its holdings in the subprime market. Worries over subprime loans have hurt even some of the biggest lenders in the United States. On August 16th, the nation's biggest housing lender, Countrywide Financial, had to turn to banks to finance its short-term debt. Normally, the company would raise the money in financial markets. Many took this as a sign that investors were becoming unwilling to provide short-term loans to companies, especially companies involved with subprime loans. Bonds are debt owed by a government or a company. The holder of a bond is paid interest until the date when the bond matures. Then the amount of the bond, its face value, is paid back. Investors can buy a new bond and keep it until it matures, or they can buy and sell existing bonds. The return on a bond is called the yield. Yields and prices of existing bonds can change as investors trade them. Yields fall when investors seek the security of bonds and are willing to pay higher prices. Yields increase as prices fall. This month, yields on the 10-year Treasury note rose above 5% for the first time in close to a year. Higher yields raise the cost for individuals and businesses to borrow money at interest rates that are tied to the 10-year note. Rising yields can also hurt stock prices. When yields rise, investors often sell stocks in order to buy bonds. If investors can get high yields holding low-risk bonds or simply keeping money in the bank, they will do it. Yet, holding bonds can also have risks, as values for new and existing bonds change in the market. Bond prices can also drop on signs of inflation. But inflation does not seem to be a threat with the current softness in the American housing market. New housing starts fell more than 2% in May. Most experts believe the United States Central Bank will keep interest rates unchanged when policymakers meet next week. But many investors are concerned about pressure for higher interest rates in Europe and Asia.